Alright guys, such Kremp again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day. So far, another Call of Duty tournament could be happening in the near future, and it's not the Esports World Cup that OpTic won last time out. It's going to be something very similar, but actually very importantly different. For the last few years in Call of Duty, we've occasionally discussed what happened if there was an actual World Cup, an American team, a Canadian team, a British team, whatever the case might be. Well, that actually might well be happening in the near future, and as of last night, there was lots of discussion from a number of pro players, especially some of the Canadians, as to what team they might look to form. Very much enjoyed to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. A couple of roster things to start with. We don't know what's going on with some of these teams in terms of when they're going to make some confirmations. Hopefully all's well with aBeZy. Of course, we are probably expecting that Falcons will announce something different relatively shortly. We think that Cellium is going to go there. Now, FaZe haven't said goodbye to Cellium precisely yet, like they did to aBeZy the other day, but Cellium was an unrestricted free agent. Likely, in due course, that's going to happen. They've probably paid him a lot of money to get him to the Falcons. That's our understanding. And aBeZy is, we think, probably getting replaced effectively by Kismet. It's all kind of strange. But, yeah, Xnid, well, I suppose it really is. aBeZy is replaced by Cellium, and then Xnid back to the SMG instead of TJ, with then Kismet rounding out the team. That's the rumour, but of course, until things get confirmed, things can all quickly change. FeLo also revealed he's going to host a 10k tournament. We saw yesterday there was that $23,000 Bell tournament that Illy and the guys won. FeLo's going to run his own 10k. I think Study did this recently to pretty good success. So looking forward to that as we get into the off season. Speaking of tournaments though, there's other things going on as well. This is one of them. It's the COD Mobile World Championship. Now, I'm not going to spend too long on this, but I just wanted to quickly look at the map set they play. So COD World Championship 2025 for COD Mobile. They've got 16 teams, down to, which is, first of all, like, let's just start there, right? Our World Championship has 8 teams. The COD World Championship back in the day, pre-CDL, used to have 32 teams. The COD Mobile has 16. They've got 4 GSL-style groups of 4, so not single round robin. GSL is basically win 2 before you lose 2, get to an 8-team double L playoffs, then a double L finals on the final day. 7th to 9th of November, if you guys are looking to tune into this. It's obviously quite a while away. This is the settings and everything that they play with. $850,000 on the line. This is the map set. The maps in that game are so good. And this is what they're playing. So they've got Apocalypse from Black Ops Cold War. They've got Combine, which is a Black Ops 3 map. It was in the beta, if you guys remember. It was actually played right at the start of that game in hardpoints, and then they realized there are better options. Hassie from BO4 also came back. Slums from Black Ops 2. Summit from Black Ops 1 that came back numerous times. Search and Destroy, there's a few maps that I'm not so familiar with. Coastal, Metropolis, Tunisia. Those are all COD Mobile specific maps. I looked up the maps though, they look kind of nice. Firing Range, a Black Ops 1 map that came out in 2010, 15 years ago. They're playing it in COD Mobile World Championships. Standoff from BO2 came back in Cold War. And then Control, they're playing Crossfire, which is that original COD 4 map from 2007. They're playing Raid, and they're playing Takeoff. Now, Takeoff was a DLC map in, well, it was called Stadium back in Black Ops 1. Then they brought it back in Black Ops 2 as another DLC map with a, refreshed, let's say, aesthetics called Takeoff. So it's kind of incredible, right? This is the map pool. Of course, it's kind of like a best of COD, but they've got maps in here from COD 4, and they've got a ton of maps from Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, that are literally 15 years old at this point, pretty much, but still deliver better results than what we get today. So that's that tournament. The other big tournament, though, is the Esports Nations Cup. So let's just quickly break this down. If you look at football or soccer, right, if you look at FIFA, the, let's say, overarching body there, they run a couple of tournaments. The big one is the FIFA World Cup, right, which is every nation in the world faces off. There's also the Club World Cup, which is less of a big deal, but it's kind of a similar thing, and that's effectively what the Esports World Cup is. And for esports, I get that makes sense. You represent your team, your organization. The players fly to represent Falcons or OpTic or FaZe or whatever the case might be. For esports, that makes sense. But for some particular esports, there is the strength in depth to actually run a Nations Cup whereby you have different teams formed for different countries. So this is what they propose, and they actually go through a number of the countries here in the video. I will just quickly pause on the UK real quick, just because it has always been a question when it comes to these World Cups as to whether the UK would be split up. Would it just be England, Scotland, Wales? You know, would you have like a full Irish team, including Northern Ireland, or how would that work? I don't know. Probably not going to be an issue. It's just going to be UK, we think. But anyway, it was confirmed yesterday that the Esports World Cup Foundation are going to run another event. They're doing the World Cup every year, which is the main one, which probably makes sense for like all esports. You can run the Esports World Cup as it was back in July for. The Esports Nations Cup, some esports, and maybe this applies to cards, don't have the strength in depth to really make this work. Not to say, though, that it would be impossible to make it happen. So that's what we're going to talk about next. The next tournament, by the way, or the first one, is not this year, it's next year. So we're talking November 2026, which is an interesting timeline, right? Because presumably next year's Esports World Cup is going to be happening a similar time to this year. I mean, last year it was in August, this year it was at the end of July. Presumably a similar timeline is going to happen next year as well, but then there's going to be another event in November. So the question therefore becomes, okay, what game do we play? If it's the start of November, probably not going to have the new COD yet. So is it going to be the old COD, or Black Ops 7, which I think people are probably hoping for, to be honest, rather than Modern Warfare 4, of which there have been some concerns, let's say, raised over the last few days. But it's going to be run every 2 years, so it's not going to be every single year. It's actually going to start in Riyadh, but then move around the world. So it's not just going to be in Saudi every year in November. The hosting country is going to be on rotation. Players represent their home nation, although what nation they represent is somewhat debatable, right? And we'll get into that in a second. Partnered with EA, Tencent, Krafton, and Ubisoft, right? So that doesn't say Microsoft, it doesn't say Activision Blizzard, but not to say that they wouldn't add those games at some point. They're looking at over 15 titles. And Call of Duty may well be included. There's no confirmation yet as to any games that are included. It's obviously a long time away, but COD was at the Esports World Cup. There is a feeling that it's very plausible that COD comes to the Esports Nations Cup as well. So, first of all, I guess the question is, would there actually be a COD tournament there? Do we have enough countries that could have teams representing them to make this work for COD? You know, are we going to be able to have teams from, let's say, Germany or from Brazil or from South Korea, right? Like, particularly unlikely. For some countries, though, I think we absolutely could. Real says, Last Dance, Rancor, Super, Metals. Obviously, Rancor now off to Toronto, right? But Toronto Koi, but still, if they had to form a Spanish team, they would probably do something very similar to this. Now, over the last couple of years, we've put this together. This Krone put together back in 2022. The Call of Duty Vanguard World Cup. There's been lots of talk in COD for a long time about, you know, whether we could make a tournament like this happen, what that would look like. Now, as I say, it's likely that it would be the United Kingdom as opposed to Team England, Team Scotland. Back in the day, we probably could have formed a Welsh team as well. You know, we had Dave, we had Rated, and, you know, a couple of others. But Team Scotland today, I think we could definitely make a Scottish team. But if it's just going to be UK, then obviously it'd be very easy to make a UK team, but it would reduce the number of teams we could potentially have. Now, the other big question here is, how do you consider some of the ethnicities, which players can represent which countries? Because obviously, the vast majority of players are from the States. So then you've got to figure out what that team would actually be, right? First of all, what would Team USA be? It's got to, I mean, it's going to have to be Simp. I mean, you're probably thinking, what, Mercules? I mean, Simp, Mercules, Scrap. I mean, maybe you don't say Mercules, but like Simp, Scrap for sure. Probably Merc, and then you need another sub. You could say Shotzzy, of course, but you could also just say aBeZy, bring the Tiny Terrors back, and then Shotzzy could play for Team Mexico, because Shotzzy does have Hispanic heritage, as does Attach, actually. He's like part Mexican, I think part Japanese, so he could represent Japan, pretty unlikely. And anyway, people were debating it a couple of years ago, and also which teams or which countries players would be able to represent, of course. You know, for France, it would be HyDra, but also you could have Cobra and, you know, maybe Legends could play as well, then Breezy or Brezzy. Like, you're looking for, you know, you could have a French team, you could have a Spanish team, you could have a UK team, you could have a US team, you could have a Canadian team, right? You could probably find some Australian guys to play as well. We could get at least 8 teams, I think. Maybe we could get 12. I mean, who knows? After that, I think that's a bit of a question, but it's definitely possible. And the other big question is, what about Team Canada? What would they look like? What team would they put together? There was also discussion because apparently for FIFA, so a player must have been resident for 5 continuous years to be eligible through residency alone, parents or grandparents also. So, you know, he's kind of discussing that, like, I wonder how this would work, but maybe CleanX could technically represent Canada just because he lived there for so long. But he's like, look, don't worry about that. I've got a Danish super team coming up. Give me a year. So yeah, we'll see what happens there. But also, like, what percentage of their, because like JoeDeceives, he's obviously done his analysis and he's 3% Danish. So like, does that count? Is that good enough to compete? I don't know. It's always a controversial one in sports in general, who can represent certain countries or whatever. But one of the other questions is, in addition to the teams that we could form, and as I say, this is a couple of years old at this point, but I think some of the general theories and player names anyway still apply. US, what would their team be? Plenty of options, right, to form a very good squad. And then Team Canada, like those would be, and also the UK team would obviously be the key contenders for a tournament like this. And it might be kind of, you know, like people might say, well, you're going to go out there to Riyadh and the US team are just going to win anyway, right? It's not even going to be close. And maybe there's some truth to that, but it's not like we couldn't form some other decent teams. The Canadian team would be very good. Dashy says, at aBeZy, let's run it back type thing, right, for the Canadian team. Now, of course, there was also discussion, could aBeZy represent India, right? Like, obviously, Gersh tweeted out, aBeZy, Gersh, Craze, and Mohawk, right? So, like, anyone with that, let's say, ethnicity and backgrounds, maybe that could be a team. I don't know. It's something to think about anyway. I don't know how this tournament's really going to be run, but yeah, they're pumping the money in. Whether COD's even there is another good question as well. But assuming that aBeZy would prefer to represent Canada because better chance to win the tournament, then it would be Dashy, aBeZy. Who else would we get? Because there's plenty of other Canadian players to think about. The other good option would be Karma, right? Bring Karma back. And Karma was in the reply to this and says, at Dashy looking for 2, me, you, aBeZy, COD looking for 1. So there you go. It's a start anyway of a very strong Canadian squad. Who would they round the team out with? Obviously Gunless, Canadian, Asim as well, other options. On this original list, we had Dashy, Gunless, Asim, and aBeZy as it was a couple of years ago. And at that time, right, Karma was very much so retired. Jimbo was another option noted here as the substitute French-Canadian player, of course. So, yeah, some other options to think about. But it would be very interesting if this actually does transpire. I think it's another question for me is, how would the team be selected, right? Like, does each country get like a representative, not from a player perspective, but let's say from an overall esports lead perspective, and then they select their players, or are there some sort of like trials? Because I don't know, like, how would an American team be chosen? Like, there's so many players that presumably would want to play because it's a free trip to Riyadh to go and like basically guarantee at least making the finals and probably making a fair load of money. You know, let's say you're Shotzzy and you could represent the Mexican team, you'd probably prefer to represent the American team and go and guarantee the money, right? You'd think. So, I don't know. I'm not sure this is going to work the best for competitive COD. There are certainly other esports like, let's say, Counter-Strike, where this would work extremely well. For COD, it might be a bit of a stretch. It may happen at some point, but it might not happen just yet. And it's going to be an event in November if it does happen. And that's pretty interesting because there aren't many championships historically that have been in November. There have only been 6, and there hasn't been one in 9 years. The guys that have won the most are actually Doug Sensor Martin, Aches and Mutation. They won a couple in November way back in the day. We're talking 2011, we're talking 2014, stuff like that. MLG Columbus, 2014, what a time. So very much interested to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.
I can't cook.
I don't really cook. I don't know how to cook anything.
The only thing I'm going to be able to use is an air fryer or a microwave.
I can't cook, so.
I'm gonna be honest, I cannot throw down in the kitchen.
Nothing. I'm burning the kitchen, if anything.
I actually don't know. I'm making the hardest thing to make, and that's tacos.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Maybe some pasta.
Probably a pizza. They're making some chicken nuggets.
Probably some scrambled eggs.
Probably like steak and rice. Steak and rice. I don't know. Microwave some Hot Pockets or something.